to explain what service dogs are, I need to kind of first explain what my path to getting one was. And I'm supposed to have wonderful slides that I made, but I put them in the wrong format. I was born in 1960s of 2 parents in Colorado. I was the oldest of 3. My childhood was happy, and I was cared for and loved by a large family. When I think back over my life, I know that there's a lot of trauma. It was an early and constant companion. First traumas happened when I was just a little girl at age 6. More traumas happened, leaving me with the feeling that the world wasn't safe. The Vietnam War was something that we were watching on TV over dinner. I was young, but I understood that my godfather, Stephen Quirk, was a part of what was going on in that war. She's gonna make herself comfortable, I guess. Or not. When I was 13, my dad left us. He told me that he was too young to have a teenage daughter. I bore great responsibility and feelings of guilt for making my dad leave. It's been a long day for her. I put together over time the fact that Dad had been cheating on Mom, and the relationship wrecked our family. I was really angry with my mom for letting it happen. I was really angry with my dad for making it happen. I became responsible for caring for my brother and sister. When my godfather got home from Vietnam, he died in a car accident, a self-inflicted car accident. My dad was gone, and now my godfather was gone. I believed there was something inherently wrong with me to make important men always leave. I tried to help Mom as much as I could. I resented her for accepting the help. I even tried to run away, but that didn't work. I got a job finally when I was 16, scooping ice cream. Being a child of divorce, I felt judged by my classmates to be less than. I resented them and isolated, not seeking friendships outside of work. At the end of my junior year in high school, there was another trauma. Some boys were doing things that they thought were okay, but they weren't. Terror, horror, and shame is what was left with me. I cried from a depth of grief I had never known before. That boy's stink was all over me. I couldn't stand it. I showered and washed my bruised and bloody body. I ran the hot water till it turned cold. I was sick. My friend wasn't there. I put on jeans and a sweatshirt and huddled in the corner. Sometime later, my friend returned. She advised me to not report it, because we were underage and we were drinking. We could be arrested. Hanging my head in shame, I agreed not to report. When I was at 21 at the University of Massachusetts, I was at a frat party. It happened again. Some would have called it date rape. I was humiliated and silenced. Again, no report. I lived inside this body which had been abused and hurt and used. My self-esteem was ruined. My sense of self was confused. I had no ability to move out of this situation. I had nightmares all the time. I knew I'd never find a loving relationship. I was soiled, damaged goods. After graduating from college, I was commissioned to the U.S. Army Chemical Corps. I achieved active duty status through the Commandant's program. And then I was posted to the 197th Infantry Brigade at Fort Benning. My boss was in an unhappy marriage, and he decided I was a plaything for him. I played along because I wanted to avoid the conflict. The affair was wrong, we both knew that, but who was I to judge? I was a ruined woman. After 2 years, he was assigned away, and we got engaged. I sought counseling at a rape crisis center, and for the first time learned that I was not at fault. Those bad things happened to me. I was not a willing participant. The nightmares and intrusive thoughts remained part of my existence. Even if fight or flight didn't happen, I froze in those situations. When I left the 197th Infantry, I went to work at the infantry school where I became a project manager for combat developments. Because I was a chemical officer, my job was to make sure that the infantry was able to use the equipment that we were making for them, the gas masks, the mop gear. One day I was feeling a little sick to my stomach. Ah, shit. I knew what that meant. I was pregnant. My decision was that I would love this baby. I was taught about options. My commander advised me to abort. My decision was that I would love this baby that had been created. I was offered crazy money by a family to adopt my baby. I was steadfast. This baby would be my salvation. The night before he was born, I was reading the Bible, the book of Matthew. I hadn't come up with a name yet, but that was it. This baby will be my Matthew, my beginning. Soon after he was born, I was notified that I would be promoted to captain. I was pleased. We went to McClellan, where I went to the Officer Advanced course, and then to Germany, where I became part of the Combat Aviation Brigade of the 3rd Armored Division. I accepted my new responsibilities and continued to lead and to teach. The August after I arrived, I learned that my unit would be deployed to Operation Desert Shield. There were forms to fill out, wills to complete, and an exercise where we were practicing the defense of the Fulda Gap. We found out that through BBC radio, that we were going to Saudi Arabia. Matthew went to live with my parents in Massachusetts. I came home from a field training exercise early to begin the process of getting him ready to discover that my husband and my nanny were having an affair. When I came home, she came running up the stairs thinking I was my husband and wearing her little negligee. She said, "Oh, Mom, I thought it was your husband." I said, "Oh, okay, go get dressed." And when he came home, I just let him know, it's over. We will divorce. But try to find a divorce lawyer when you're deployed to combat. They don't want to cover you. They don't want to help. So I had to stay married a lot longer than I wanted to. Eventually, I volunteered to be in the advance party to go to Desert Shield. My colonel, Lieutenant Colonel, decided that I was his plaything. He would walk up to me and rub my butt. He would grab me and say, "honk." He was cruel. He would have me work the night shift at Brigade Talk, where I was responsible for everything that the brigade was doing. And then he would send me on missions across the desert with a female driver. Now in Desert Storm, in that part of the world, women were not accepted, appreciated. They weren't even allowed to call us women. In order to drive, they had to designate us as a third gender. We were no longer women, we were genderless soldiers. So I had 30 minutes a day to eat, sleep, and bathe, and prepare for the next shift. It was grueling. At one point, in one of the helicopters, we flew over what became known as the Highway of Death. The stench from that highway was horrific. The sight was mind-numbing. There was fear, a lot of it. At night, we would circle the wagons in defensive postures, and we would watch with unaided eyesight to see tanks blowing each other up. The crossing of the Wadi al-Batin was an important combat that my unit was a part of. As we drove into the battlefield, the fires and burning tank hulls greeted us. One night I was approached by an enemy soldier. I took him prisoner, and the MPs quickly and efficiently took over. I watched as rocket systems from the 3rd Armored Division engaged Iraqi combatants. There was no fear. It was surreal. I watched as rocket systems from the 3AD flew from behind me to in front of me. And I recalled one of the men that I worked with in the infantry school saying, "We don't need to put our uniforms on women. They'll never be in combat." I said, "There goes, Billy." One day, Colonel Gaynor dismissed my non-commissioned officer and slid into the Humvee to talk to me. As he gushed out words, I only heard nonsense. He unsnapped the pistol that was at his hip and pulled the pistol from the leather case. Unleashing his weapon, he slid it down my leg. "You better provide more structure to your NCO," he said. "You know what you need to do," he admonished. The words didn't tell the story, but the cold blue steel and his menacing sneer made his intentions clear. "Speak again, you will die." Somehow I knew what he meant. He didn't need to say it. I lived in terror from that moment onward. As the ground war moved to its conclusion, commands were changed, efficiency reports were written, and awards were recommended. Colonel Gaynor wrote a low-level award for me. His boss, Colonel Burke, wrote things like, "Best chemical officer ever. I would want to serve in combat with this chemical officer ever the need were to rise again." He rescinded the low-level award and put me in for the Bronze Star, which I received. I wrote the decontamination plan in the desert that became the standard for the Army. Once the peace, a tenuous peace, was signed, we got back into the business of preparing to be a peacetime Army again. Redeployment marshalling areas were assigned. We went back to Dammam, and soon the ships that had recently delivered our equipment were arriving to bring it back to Europe. Finally, the day arrived that I would be redeployed to Germany. The men I worked with and who had become my brothers were behaving differently now that we had this focus on going home. These guys that I had risked my life with, who I depended on, who had depended on me, were no longer interested in the bonds of friendship and brotherhood that we had established. Again, abandonment. We boarded giant freedom birds and were shown updates on what had been going on in the US and the world while we were away. I sat alone, feeling lost, abandoned, and afraid. I turned to the window, and tears of frustration, loneliness, and loss careened down my cheeks. It seemed everyone was planning to see their loved ones at the hangar. I had nobody. My divorce was just about final. My friends were the men I served with. They were all pulling away. I had nobody to meet me, to welcome me home from combat. When we arrived at the hangar, at the caserne, hugs and kisses were all around me. Tears of joy and happiness, of reunited families. I looked for the brigade adjutant to get the keys to my house. We wouldn't be allowed to drive our cars for 30 days. How, I wondered, was I going to find my home? Then I saw my ex. He offered me a ride. I exhaustedly accepted. My nightmare came to life. He was Lieutenant Colonel Gaynor all of a sudden, and he was getting what he wanted. I fought, I punched, I screamed. I wrapped myself in a blanket to chase his touch away. A nightmare made real, too real. I found it difficult to hide my abundance of emotion as I placed a call to the United States to talk to my nephew. I hurt so badly. The colonel announced to our unit that in 45 days we would be going on a field training exercise. I knew I couldn't go. This child that no longer knew who his own mom was needed me. How could I leave him behind? The problem needed a solution. I searched and searched for childcare. Well, the wives had all blacklisted me because I had dared to make a complaint against one of their husbands. I went to meet with my colonel. I told him my brother would come. My brother would come and take care of my son. I asked to be released from the field training exercise. I told him I would work behind the scenes with the brigade surgeon to ensure that chemically related medical issues were addressed, and I informed him of my child care plan. I replied that I wanted to be the first woman general of the Chemical Corps. I told him that the Army was my love. Then you will participate in the training exercise, he said. I was crushed. I again asked for an exemption. He said if I wasn't going to be at the field exercise, I needed to tender my resignation. Distraught, I summoned my courage and phoned home. I asked if my son and I could live with my parents. They said yes. Dad asked if I wanted a lawyer. I declined. The Army doesn't want me anymore. I won't force the issue, I replied. I made my way back to the States, to Massachusetts, where my family was waiting. When I deplaned, I was whisked away to a long white limo that my family had hired. Mom was holding Matthew. He turned to me and then away. I tried to understand. The pain seared my heart. Abandonment, that old friend, that I had passed it on to my son. As we arrived to my parents' house, there were streamers, there were balloons, there were flags, there were people all over the street. There was a TV crew, there were TV reporters, there was a newspaper team. There were politicians, neighbors, friends, family. There were fireworks. This, for me, I couldn't believe it. This was amazing. Neighbor children sang patriotic songs and asked for my autograph. I walked around in a daze. They were wrong. I was no hero. I was just a soldier who participated in winning battles. I was permanently defeated. The crowd of people around me suffocated me. I couldn't escape. I pushed my back against the outside wall of the back porch and watched the fireworks. Each boom reminded me of the artillery I had witnessed. The scent of cordite reminded me of the highway of death and the destruction, not only of the Iraqi army, but of me. I took a job as a healthcare provider and eventually decided to go to nursing school. I chose a diploma program because I thought it would prepare me best. I continued my studies and sought treatment at the local veterans hospital. I was told, no, we don't have programs for people like you. People like me. Women? They sent 40,000 of us to the Gulf. And they're not going to take care of me? I went to civilian doctors. They didn't get where I was coming from. Again and again, I sought treatment to deal with my demons. Again and again, I was turned away. With my RN in hand, I sought experiences that would give me full understanding of the physical ailments that the nurses treated. I steered away from psychiatry because I was scared. I was a pediatric nurse, I was an oncology nurse, a med-surg nurse, a urology nurse, a stroke nurse. I became a certified hospice and palliative care nurse. I was a triage nurse, and I worked in a prison. One associate recommended that I talk to his friend about treatment and disability. I did. I only wanted treatment, though. My wounds weren't bad enough for disability. Through the association, I was introduced to a vet center. I got a therapist who finally got me. She listened. Finally, I got care. Over the next few years, I tried all the different therapies. talk therapy, DBT, CBT, EMDR, biotherapy, mindfulness, individual therapy, video therapy, group therapy. I was hospitalized for suicidal and homicidal ideation. My supervisor had done things that placed me back in the war and in the clutches of Colonel Gaynor. I wanted to kill her. Anxiety was my constant companion. My first 2 marriages ended. The first one with adultery, the second one with faithlessness. I was done, no more marriage for me. Some of the guys I would meet would say things like, "But Matthew needs a dad." They supported me, and they wanted to support Matt. They loved me, although I was a broken mess. While I was at the vet center, I met this one wonderful guy. He sat across the room from me, wearing his Guinness hat, pulled low down over his eyes, wearing his red jacket. We became close friends. You don't date someone you're in therapy with, though. Eventually, I got a new job. And that friend of mine and I shared a hug. It was the most magnificent hug I'd ever had. I wanted that hug to tell him how much I loved him. I think he knew. Because when I called him a couple weeks later, he agreed to go out on a date. That was 22 years ago. We're still together. Dick and I both have PTSD. When one of us is strong, the other one, we're able to help the other one who might not be feeling as strong. When I'm hurting, he's strong. When he's hurting, I'm strong. When we moved to the Villages 4.5 years ago, mostly we were leaving the winter. We had both been injured because of ice and snow and were ready to be warm. Not long after arriving, I became aware of Tri-County Women Veterans. I joined and volunteered for leadership positions that I held for 2 years. One of the areas Tri-County raised money for is canine support. Once I heard about this, I began to do research. I eventually applied for and was accepted to the Canines for Warriors program. Of the many programs that are out there, Canines had a mission statement that I really liked. It states, "Canines for Warriors is determined to end veteran suicide and return our warriors to a life of dignity and independence. We rescue and train dogs to be paired as service dogs at no cost to warriors struggling with PTSD and the other invisible wounds of war." The application process was long and difficult, but I did it. There was a 3-year wait for the dog. Many months later, I received the call that my name had been moved up on the list. I was invited to the August 24 canine class. "Yes," I replied. My coping skills at the time weren't working real well for me. I needed something new. For 3 weeks, I trained with Tanzie at the Panchavidra training site. She had already been trained for 10 months, and she had already passed all the requirements for a service dog. It was just my turn to learn how to operate with her. A year ago, I had a meltdown. I was dealing with, or rather not dealing with, anxieties and depressions and stressors. I took a prescribed anti-anxiety pill, chased it with a shot, had another prescribed pill, had a lemon drop martini. It was the best one I ever made. It was also the last one I ever had. My family saved my life by reporting me to the Sheriff's Department and having me go through the Baker Act program. 72 hours of mandated inpatient hospital setting. I was there from a Friday to a Tuesday, a little more than 72 hours. I was honest and looking for better answers. 1 year and 19 days, I've been free from alcohol and prescribed medications that almost ended me. Tanzie and I continued to train. She has about 35 different commands that she is able to perform. She's really tired right now though, so I'm not going to try to get her to go through them. We are in the process of retesting to maintain our certification. There are tons and tons of organizations that support service dogs for veterans. There's Canines for Warriors, where I went. There's Paws Assisting Veterans, America's Vet Dogs, Canine Partners for Patriots, Valor Service Dogs, Needs Incorporated, Guardian Angels Medical Service Dogs. The Association of Service Dog Providers actually offers a directory of service dog different providers in the country. Assistance Dogs International is a great website for providing more information about service dogs. So in August of 24, Tanzie and I were joined when they brought her to the porch where we met. Just making eye contact with her brought tears to my eyes. She looked just like our big dog at home. Same coloring, and she seemed like she would be a great friend. It's not been easy. We've been working really hard. She was still very much a puppy when I got her, but she's 2 years old now, 2.5. We share a birthday in December. No, she doesn't want to say anything. So that's, I felt like I needed to tell you my background in order to tell you why I got a service dog. Thank you.